Week 12 of the fantasy football season. Here's the top 12 defense DST units. I'm ranking this week number 1, the Kansas City Chiefs. So this week, a great matchup with the Carolina Panthers, an offense that's had trouble all season long. I know the last couple of weeks, Bryce Young's definitely improved, and they got a solid running back in Chuba Hubbard, but pretty much on the outside. Xavier Legette, Jalen Cochran, and returning Adam Thielen. I don't think he's enough for this offense really to do much, and after coming off a bad loss, I think this Kansas City defense, they're going to tee off in this game. Offense will get them off to an early start, and they'll have a big ball game this week. Number 2, the Denver Broncos. So this week, a slam dunk matchup at the Vegas Raiders, where their offense has struggled all season long. Gardner Minshew, he's been a crash test dummy, taking a lot of sacks this season and turning the football over. And this Denver unit, when you got a corner like Patrick Surtain, who I think is the best cornerback in all pro football, it makes everything easier on the defense. So this week, I think Denver once again gets off to an early start. Their offense has improved over the last month of the season, and their defense has a big game. Number 3, the Houston Texans. So this Texan defense, the last few weeks in good matchups, has taken advantage, especially last week at the Dallas Cowboys. Cooper Rush was under constant pressure the whole game. They had a fumble recovery touchdown in that one. And this week versus a weak offense of the Tennessee Titans, I think Houston, they'll get off to an early start at home. And then Tennessee will be one-dimensional, and that's where they really kick things into gear. And we saw last week at Dallas where they left some points on the board, dropping 2 or 3 interceptions, where obviously they would have had more fantasy points. Number 4, the Pittsburgh Steelers, so a great matchup this week on Thursday night. I know these Thursday night games are usually high-scoring affairs, no matter who the teams are. But this Steelers defense, they're locked in. Last week, holding a high-powered offense of the Baltimore Ravens only to 16 points is big numbers, no doubt about it. So this week versus the gunslinger, Jameis Winston, who we know he's got a big arm, he could get yards and score touchdowns, but also interceptions and taking a lot of sacks have been a problem for Winston throughout his NFL career. So this week, I think this Steelers defense, led by TJ Watt, gets pressure on Winston early and often. Off to an early lead, Pittsburgh. It's going to make everything easier for this defense this week. Number 5, the Detroit Lions. So this line defense, believe it or not, with Hutchinson out, has possibly played better over the last month of the season. Versing pretty poor opponents who can't move the football offensively. And last week, they got out to an early start, 152-6, and they did the Jacksonville Jaguars in early and often. So this week at Indianapolis, Anthony Richardson returned to the lineup last week. He had a good game, no doubt about it. But I just believe, once again, this Detroit Lion team, they're going to get off to a 10, 14-point lead and tee off on Anthony Richardson on this offense, where they've turned the football over and defenses have had success all season long versus Colt offense. Number 6, the Minnesota Vikings. So this Viking DST, one of the best defenses in the league, led by defensive coordinator in Flores. And they're going out there, they're putting quarterbacks on the ground early and often. They're turning the football over and holding opponents down. So this week, a decent matchup with the Chicago Bears, where this Bear offense has definitely struggled over the last few weeks. Where Caleb Williams, he's having his rookie woes, holding on to the football too long, taking big sacks, and he's not really in sync with his wide receivers in DJ Moore, Keenan Allen, and Rome Odunze. So I think Minnesota in a division game, and after 2 successful victories at the Jacksonville Jaguars and the Tennessee Titans, I think they go out there this week in Soldier Field and play another good game. Number 7, the Washington Commanders. So this Commander DST has definitely improved a little bit over the last few weeks. I know last week Saquon Barkley went off with a monster game, especially in the second half. But for the most part, the majority of that game they played well, I thought, was Washington. So this week with a great matchup with the Cowboys coming to town and with Cooper Rush at quarterback, they can't move the football. Cooper Rush, he's taking a lot of sacks. And also, obviously, Dan Quinn, the head coach of the Commanders, was the Cowboy defensive coordinator for many seasons. And he knows that offense system in and out. So this week, I think Washington, they get off to an early lead and they have their way with Cooper Rush in this Cowboy offense. Number 8, Miami Dolphins. So the Dolphins, I know their defense isn't all that great. But I'm just going with matchup here and a 1-week streaming option with a good matchup versus a pretty middle-of-the-pack to poor offense of the New England Patriots. It's definitely improved over the last few weeks as this New England offense, obviously led by Drake May and their quarterback, but they don't really have true number 1 options. Obviously, Hunter Henry, Demario Douglas, top receiving options in the passing game. And then at running back, you got Ramondre Stevenson, who I think he's a decent running back, don't get me wrong, but I just don't believe he's much of a threat where defenses can't game plan, obviously, and stop this offense. I think Miami, another home game, their offense has played well since Tua returned, and they go out there and have a good performance. Number 9, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, another 1-week streaming option, a good matchup at the New York Giants. Tommy DeVito starting a quarterback for New York. And DeVito, I know last season he was pretty decent at times when he filled in for Daniel Jones when he was out for the season with a torn ACL. But Tampa Bay coming off a bye week, getting refreshed, even though I know the secondary has been giving up a lot of points all season long and getting burned. But this week, I think Tampa Bay, they could get some pressure on Tommy DeVito. They could cause a few turnovers. And this week is a streaming option. I think it's a decent outing for him. Number 10, the Philadelphia Eagles. I know this week it's a tough matchup. No doubt about it for Philadelphia. But this defense, they've kicked it into gear now over the last 4 or 5 weeks of the season. So Philly, one of the hottest teams in the league on a nice winning streak. Last week, they took care of business pretty easy versus the Washington Commanders, especially in the second half. But this week, I expect a high-scoring game between them and the Los Angeles Rams in the fast track in Los Angeles on Sunday night. But Philadelphia, they get to the quarterback, they create sacks. And their secondary, one of the best secondaries in all pro football, where they've held all season long elite receivers to 30 yards or less over the last few weeks, including Terry McLaurin. Last week, only 2 fantasy points in PPR week. So this week, I think Philadelphia could slow down this offense a little bit of the Los Angeles Rams. And we even saw a couple weeks ago this Ram offense didn't play well on Monday night with the Dolphins in town. Number 11, the Chicago Bears. So this bad defense, I still believe is a good unit. And I know Minnesota has good weapons, Justin Jefferson, TJ Hawkinson, Aaron Jones. But Sam Darnold, you just don't know weekly what Sam Darnold's going to come and play, obviously. We saw a few weeks ago, Darnold had 3 turnovers at the Jaguars. I know last week he had a good ball game at Tennessee, but this week I think Chicago, with one of the better and underrated units in the league, in my opinion, could get some pressure on Sam Darnold, could cause a few turnovers in this game. And these division games, especially in the NFC North, anything happens, I just expect this bad D to go out there and have a decent performance in the 12th and final defense DST I'm ranking is the San Francisco 49ers. I know the matchup isn't great this week for the 49ers, but with 6 teams on bye, pretty much slim pickings at the back end here in the rankings. The Chargers I could have went with in this one, but a very tough matchup versus the Ravens, and we saw Cincinnati last week go out, have a big game. And also, you could have considered maybe Baltimore at the back end, but I think San Francisco, in a big ball game at Green Bay, they're going to buckle down a little bit defensively after they've had their lapses over the last couple of weeks here where they've blown a couple games they should have won. And all season long, for the most part, a few games they've blown in the fourth quarter. Going back versus Seattle last week, obviously. Going back to early in the season, the Arizona Cardinals snuck a victory by this 49er team. So right now, this 49er team, I think they're going to get back to the basics on defense. And I know Nick Bosa is banged up, and we don't know if he's going to play in this game. But this week at Green Bay, Jordan Love, we know he's a gunslinger. He's going to turn that football over at times, and he's taken some big hits and sacks this season. So I think this week San Francisco could be a decent back-end option. That's the top 12 defense DST rankings for Week 12 of the fantasy football season.